Absolutely. I mean, everywhere I went, they said, "Oh, you're a kikokushijo." Ah, that's why. And I had no idea what that meant. But
Mm.
I think it was referred to mostly when I spoke my opinion or, told them what I thought. Because back in the day, of course, and being an idol singer, we all had to just smile and say, "Hi, yes, hi." And
Mm.
anytime I didn't do that, or I would ask why, the adults around me would say, kikokushijo だから. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Right? So, I had a really hard time with, I definitely had an identity crisis because I was trying to fit in as a typical Japanese idol singer. And at the same time, I was trying to get used to being a Japanese high school student.
Welcome to the 58th episode of Tokyo Alumni Podcast. Today, our guest is a singer and actress. In 2011, the Japanese music television program Music Station listed her as the 50th all-time best-selling idol in Japan, with 2.8 million records sold to date. She was born in Japan and raised in Guam and Hawaii, and eventually moved back to Japan at the age of 14, where she attended ASIJ for 1 year from 1981 to 1982. She would later enter Sophia University, receiving a bachelor's degree in comparative culture. In 1982, she released her first single, Isoide Hatsukoi. In 1983, her fifth single, Natsu Iro became her first big hit, making it to the top 10 of the charts, winning countless awards that year. As a result of the success of the song, she made her first appearance at the 34th edition of the year-end NHK Kōhaku Red and White Song Festival. In recent years, she's become more involved with acting on television, along with being a presenter on the radio, along with many other projects. Welcome to the podcast, you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Wow, that's kind of mind-boggling. How'd you find out all that information? You're amazing.
Google. There's, yeah, it's a lot on you. I think I actually cut down a lot of it, but hopefully we can sort of um, get into a bit more depth about the things maybe that I didn't cover there. And what's very interesting about your relationship with the international schools is not only did you attend as a student, but you're also currently a mother of a
Mm.
student at an international school, well, at ASIJ to be specific, and your older daughter also graduated ASIJ. So I'd be very interested to talk to you about sort of your perspective as a parent versus being a student, and of
Mm, mm.
course your very long career in the showbiz business. But let's sort of rewind all the way back to the earliest days. You're born in Japan, in Atami, and later on you went to Guam and Hawaii, where you were there till age 14. But what took you back to Japan at age 14?
So, when I was 14, my mother and I were in an elevator at a department store in Waikiki, which is in Honolulu on Oahu Island. And this person scouted me. She asked me to sing a few bars of a song to see if I could carry a tune, which I did. And then they flew me over to Japan to go through an audition. And that was, before I knew it, that was in August. By October, I had moved back to Japan and I was meeting record label VIPs and just getting ready for my debut.
And not only is this happening fast, but this is all happening at age 14, right? Roughly a high school freshman. So how were you able to sort of juggle all these emotions and changes and being under this high pressure at such a young age?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that, and I think for me, it just seemed really exciting at the time. I didn't really think of the consequences of, oh my goodness, I'm not going to be able to live with my mom and my grandmother for a while, whom, I grew up with, or I have to change schools, or I'm going to go into a totally different new environment, and I'm going to be, sort of put into this odd world of show business. For me, it was just sort of, oh, we're taking pictures. Oh, we're singing. Oh, I'm doing an audition. Wow, this is kind of fun. Wow, today seemed like a short day. Okay. And, I would go to bed, but it just happened so fast. It was really exciting. I loved singing. So my parents were divorced when I was 3, but my father was a jazz singer. Although we moved around, he was, in Japan. So when I came back, I was able to see him and tell him that I would pursue a career of singing, and he was really excited. So I think I've always loved singing, and when the opportunity came, I thought, oh, this sounds like fun. I'll try it out. I think that's what you think when you're a teenager. You don't think this is going to be a career for you, you know?
And when you started this singing, so you said your father it was a jazz musician, so I imagine he was just elated with you singing. But was there any pushback by people around you saying, you should like finish school first, or would it affect your studies?
Oh, definitely. So one of the qualifications that my grandmother told my agency's shacho, president, was that she needs to finish high school and hopefully go to college because education is important. So the shacho, the president, promised that I would definitely finish high school, of course, and she demanded that I was put into an international school because she said, we're from Hawaii. English was, our second language, or my second language. So they put me into the American school, and I remember my manager saying, do you know how much the American school costs? Which is probably about 1/10 of what it does now. But I'm like, I have no idea. But it was fine. And, I love the new environment. And I just love the ASIJ vibe because being in Hawaii, I've always felt that I was Japanese, or I had to really have a concrete idea of an identity of who I was or where I came from. And at ASIJ, I just felt like everyone was really comfortable. There were people who had parents from the US but were born in Japan who had blonde hair, blue eyes, but they really felt a connection with Japan or vice versa, like an Asian American, I guess you would say. Someone who looked like me, Japanese by blood or by, I don't know how to politically correctly say this. My kids are so strict about me talking about this these days. But basically, so it was just a mixture of multicultural people. And I just felt so comfortable. And I thought, wow, I never knew a world like this existed. It was really sad when I had to transfer to a Japanese school because of my work.
Yeah, we were talking a bit about that off air. Your tenure at ASIJ actually wasn't that long, but you really seem to enjoy your time there. And I think identity is a common theme throughout this podcast. And you being in Japan, once you did leave ASIJ and were completely, sort of in this Japanese atmosphere, did you ever feel like it was a challenge in regards to sort of integrating to that society around you, who maybe didn't look at you as being sort of part of their, quote unquote, Japanese society?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, everywhere I went, they said, oh, you're a kikokushijo. Ah, that's why. And I had no idea what that meant. But I think it was referred to mostly when I spoke my opinion or, told them what I thought. Because back in the day, of course, and being an idol singer, we all had to just smile and say, hi, yes, hi, And anytime I didn't do that or I would ask why, the adults around me would say, kikokushijo da kara. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Right? So I had a really hard time with, I definitely had an identity crisis because I was trying to fit in as a typical Japanese idol singer. And at the same time, I was trying to get used to being a Japanese high school student. And I just really missed being in touch with the westernized side of myself and my friends. And I just remember I struggled, yeah, for at least 5 years, I think. Yeah.
Do you feel like during, especially your earlier years, as when you're singing, were there any other people in the show business arena that you could sort of relate to that were either hafu or kikokushijo or or just not Japanese?
Yes. So do you know rock singer Ann Lewis?
Yes. I believe you
Vaguely,
covered a
maybe.
song by her. in 2016, right? And I want to get to that later, but yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so Anne is I think she's about 10 years my senpai, 10 years older than I am. Career-wise, maybe a little more, but and in Japan, it's all about senpai kohai. So when I first met her, I said, "Ah, hajimemashite, yoroshiku onegaishimasu," as a kohai should do. And she was like, "Oh, come on. I know you're from Hawaii." She goes, "Come on, let's talk English. Let's speak in English. Let's get to be friends." And we just hit it off. I mean, and she took me under her wings, and we just became really good friends. And I just remember she and Teresa Tensan, she's a singer from Taiwan.
Mm.
I think those two were the only ones I felt completely myself with. I could speak in English, I could be myself, I could talk about, I don't know, my love life, which I wasn't supposed to have, or which you're not supposed to have when you're an idol singer in Japan, even now. So yeah, that was definitely honto kansha shiteru. I mean, I when I look back on it, if I didn't have that, I would have gone crazy, I think.
That's really makes sort of this. I think we're just going to jump forward. I like to go chronologically, but while we're on the topic of Anluise, in 2016, there was a song you released. It was a cover of, I believe, Anluise originally sang it, and it became one of the theme songs for the SDGs.
Hmm.
I was wondering, what was the whole process of getting together? Or I think it was Takashi Fuji, right, who
Right.
is also quite a prominent producer in Japan, as well as a former singer. I guess he sings a little bit still now too, but I think he does more producing.
Oh, he does. He sings, yes.
How did that all come about? And was that you who sort of pushed forward the idea of covering an Anduisa song, or is it Fuji's idea?
The idea of covering Anne's song, Koi no Boogie Train, was my idea. So Fuji Takashi-san, who's a big fan of just idol singers back in the 80s, we had met, of course, we met a few times, but he came on a show that I was co-hosting called Disco Train. And it's a show where you just sit down and talk about all your favorite music, which is really I mean, it's a great show. It was a great show. And he sat there and he said, I actually just came up with my new record company or record label, and we're looking for artists. So I jokingly said, oh, maybe you can produce me. And he goes, really? And I think that was a year before that. And then 2015, we started, talking about what we could cover. And he really wanted he wanted to take my old songs and rearrange them get them rearranged by disc jockeys or DJs of the time now. And so he had chosen a few songs. And I said, I really want to sing this song. So I gave it to him. The arrangement came out great. And in the midst of all this, famous photographer Leslie Key said he wanted to shoot my cover for the album. And so he came on board, and then he heard the songs and he said, can I take this song, maybe make it a theme song for Kokuren, the United Nations SDGs, because they're looking for something like this. And I think this would be perfect. So I was like, oh yeah, sure. I mean, this was all over, like on the phone, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. And before I knew it, Leslie came up with this tie-up. And he said, United Nations is really excited. It's a great song. I want to shoot a music video on it. And yeah, next thing I know, he had like 100 people that he had contacted, models, actresses, and they all just came to the studio. It was all, volunteer basis, and they all did it for Leslie and for the cause. And so
Wow.
that was really exciting. Yeah.
And a good 14 years prior to this video, in 92, if I'm not mistaken, you partook in the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. And your college major was also comparative studies. So has this concept of sort of globalism and global issues, has that always sort of been in the forefront of what you do outside of the showbiz career? And how do you try to integrate? I mean, you kind of already brought up a great example of integrating showbiz political action, like the music video. But are there any other examples in your career where you've been able to sort of embed, these type of, I guess, political, social changes through show business?
So yes, so in 1992, I went to Rio, to Brazil, as a representative of this NPO. Now I think it's an NGO group called Josei Renrakukai, which is headed by the lyricist Yukawa Reiko sensei. And, basically they wanted me to learn about global warming, and they wanted me to come back with a message about reducing or rethinking our lifestyle because of consuming, right? Consumerism. And I think now they call it the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. But basically, 1992, we didn't have an internet. So I would go to meetings and I would actually call them from a public phone with coins, speaking to a reporter who wrote columns for newspapers back then, and give them my take of what I learned that day. And all they really wanted was sort of a perspective of, someone from their 20s had a public name, right? So people would be like, oh, look, maybe Hayami is interested in it. Maybe we should start reassessing our lifestyle. And so that's why I went. And I came back, and every time I was interviewed about anything, because I was single back then, they would of course ask me about my private life and my love life. I would try to squeeze in what I learned in Rio. And I said, and by the way, our garbage, they're going to start charging for our garbage now. And everyone's like, what? I'm like, yeah. And whenever you can, we should recycle, because recycling is good. But of course, that part would always be cut out. Or they would look at me kind of strangely and say, why are you so interested in garbage? And I'm like, because people will have to be in a few years. But of course, we've come a long way since then. And I'm just so thankful to Yuka sensei that she chose me, because I remember when she spoke to me, I said, I don't know anything about this. I'm not a politician. This is just, I don't know. I don't think I'm the right person. She goes, well, of course you're the right person. You eat, you sleep, you live, don't you? Everyone does that. So you're just, and you have an opinion, which is good. And I can't believe it was 92. Gosh, it's such a long time already.
Yeah, it's that 92 and then the video 2016. So talking about a span of over 20 years. And when it comes to the SDGs, we've addressed gender equity, environmentalism. Is there any one that you specifically feel strong about in regards to sort of, as we enter? I think it was rewritten recently, right? They've changed their sort of goal date to 2030, because I think the original SDGs were for 2020. So yes. Are there any ones that you feel particularly passionate about as we sort of move each year closer and closer to 2030?
Right. Well, definitely gender equality. The other day I took part in a Zoom conference that my older daughter was part of. It was part of her college activity, and it was interesting. The hostess, she introduced herself as, I forgot her name, but she said, "Hi, I'm Kathy. I identify as a she, he, her," and she went on, and then everyone else introduced themselves that way. And I thought, wow, time's really changing. And I thought, that's great that you could just be so upfront like that, in the very beginning. And so gender equality, definitely. Equal education, oh, definitely, because we know how important education is. And I don't mean just general education, but just education about everything. And even I'm learning through my daughters, because anytime I say anything politically incorrect, she goes, Mom, please don't say that. You just can't say that anymore. And so I'm just like, okay, I have to really, I have to keep up with the times. And because even if your belief or, is not, how do you say, clouded, the way we are used to expressing ourselves and the way we should be expressing ourselves is different, right? So that's educating ourselves. So, yeah.
That's a great point. And I know what you mean with the generation change too. Like it's overall, I would agree. It's positive. I mean, I'm relatively young. Again, depends on who, right? Everything's relative. I always feel a bit older because I'm always with 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds. So like as a high school teacher. But even between my generation and the current high schoolers, I look back when I was in high school, and there were just certain words that, we would use that would just not be okay today. And we just weren't really aware back then. And it's not like we were homophobic or, anything like that, but so yeah, I agree that,
Definitely.
this
It's the
is
awareness, right? Yes, exactly. Yeah.
this new generation. Obviously they have their issues too. We don't want the Gen Z to think that they're the best, but, I think at least when it comes to, awareness of social issues, they seem to really be light years ahead of millennials and older. So sort of shifting gears from SDGs and education and whatnot, I want to go back to sort of your career as an idol. So you partook in the year-end NHK Kōhaku Uta Gassen, more commonly known as Kouhaku. So I know it's sort of has changed in regards to its profile, especially the last few decades. Although I guess recently with COVID, a lot of people watched it. But when you were on it, it was really like, everyone watched Kouhaku, right? It was like every single person watched it. So what was it like being on it at such a young age? And what was sort of the behind the scenes like for the 3 years that you partook in the Kouhaku?
Well, it was really exciting because I remember the first year I finished Kōhaku, the next day I hopped on a plane and went to Hawaii because we were shooting a commercial there. And I remember someone from, I think a neighborhood friend came up to me and said, "Hey, I just saw you on that Red and White Festival. Congratulations." And I thought, wow, even people from Hawaii saw me. And so that was kind of exciting. Behind the scenes, it was exciting. I think back then, if it was announced that you were on the Red and White Festival, my stylist and my agency went to work right away to make 3 or 4 dresses for each different scene that you're in Kōhaku.
Mm.
So I just remember I thought, wow, this is really busy because getting fitted for a new dress sounds exciting, but it's a lot of work as well, especially when I was already busy. And then we would have these rehearsals back then. I don't know if you still watch Kōhaku, but they have those scenes where the senpais and the kohais get together and they have a theme. If it's I don't remember what my theme was, but if it's social dancing, people would get together and we would rehearse. And so that went on a few times. And because everyone was very busy and we didn't really have strict labor laws back then, I remember going into rehearsals from like 11 p.m. and finishing at 1 a.m. and going
Wow.
home, getting 3 hours of sleep, and then getting up early in the morning to go outside of Tokyo to promote my new single. So it was
Mm.
just very crazy back then. I mean, I think on average, I would probably have 4 to 5 hours of sleep.
Wow.
Yeah, but
Is this
that's the way it was.
and was this hard schedule was that sort of the industry norm back then? And is it still kind of like that? Or you just mentioned labor laws. Are they a bit more strict now because they enforce labor laws?
Oh, they're much more strict now. I think the TV stations, they cut their lights off like at midnight, so no one can really work past that time now. Whereas before, back in the 80s, we would be there till like 2 a.m., 3 a.m.
Wow.
Basically, if the job needed to be done, it needed to be done. So,
Wow. And
yeah.
so you're in Kohaku, very young age again. And were there any acts when you participated that still sort of are embedded in your mind in regards to other performers from that? I think it was 82 to 84.
To 83 then, 83, 83, 84, 85, right? Yes, so I remember the first year I finished Kouhaku Uta Gassen. I think a month later I received a big envelope from Suizenji Kyoko-san. Do you know her?
Yeah.
She's a famous Japanese singer, but she had taken photos of me during rehearsals, and I think her manager had taken some photos of me during the actual live performance. And she wrote a really nice letter saying, "Hey, congratulations on your first appearance on Kōhaku." She was actually emceeing that year. And she said, these, are just for kinen. These are for you to keep for memory's sake. And good luck in your coming years. And I thought that was so sweet of her because I'm sure she's so busy, but for her to have, found the time to do that, that was very nice of her.
That's really cool, especially back then. It's not like the iPhone, right? It's not like you can just go boom and take a picture.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
quite
You
a
had to actually take pictures, go and have developed.
yeah.
Exactly.
You're a pop idol as teen, and then you eventually sort of begin to expand your areas into, radio personality. There's the TV shows. When you were making this shift, was this sort of a conscious decision that you were pushing forward, or was it something more of the where your agency and the workplace was sort of advocating for?
So when I was 21, I think I was recording my album, and I remember distinctively my manager said, "This will probably be your last album because, you're now at the age where records or CDs, I think, don't sell anymore." And I
Mm.
was like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, so you can't keep singing. I think you're gonna have to branch into acting." And I just remember I was so sad because
Mm.
I remember the first 4 years of my career, I was always sick when I was recording because I was so busy and I never had uh, a proper time to really be ready and to prepare for my recordings. And finally, I was coming into, a position where my voice was okay. I had started learning to kind of learn how to sing and to express myself. And I had ideas of what kind of albums I wanted to release or songs I wanted to release. And then here my manager was saying, "Well, time's up, kid. You gotta hit the road." So I just remember I was really sad and I had spoken to my father about it. And I
Mm.
remember my father said, "You don't have to stop singing because as long as you have one person who wants to
Mm.
hear you sing, you should continue singing. And it doesn't mean you have to sing the pop songs because you can
Mm.
start singing jazz." And I think from that year on, he and I would do joint concerts together. And yeah, and I started singing standard jazz songs. It was difficult because I'm so used to that, that pop beat. And he would go, "No, that's not it." And he would stop me and he would, um, but it was great. He would give me advice. And thanks to him, I was able to keep singing because, your voice box is a muscle, right? I mean, if you really stop singing altogether, and for some people, I think they're naturally good singers. I am not. So if I stopped using my voice, I'm sure my range would deteriorate. But thanks to him, I was able to keep up my singing. And during that time, I got an offer to do a musical,
Mm.
which was very rare for anyone from TV doing stage back then. But
Well, I was gonna say, which musical were you part of?
so the first musical I was in, I had a part of Sandy in the musical Grease, and I
Mm.
loved that movie growing up. So that was really exciting. And then after that, I was Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz for 6 years, or was it 6 years, 5 years? Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, those are pretty major roles there.
It was
Sandy
really
and
nice.
Dora.
It was, yeah. And, of course, being on stage, you learned how to sing differently. So it was my chance to really grow as a singer. And then in 1996, I auditioned for the part of Cosette in Les Miserables. And
Mm.
that was really difficult because that was way out of my range. But the key was really out of my range. But I learned a lot. So I guess that's just part of the process. You're constantly learning.
Were the people around you in Broadway kind of different in regards to their approach towards art and in regards to sort of how they interacted with you in comparison to the pop scene?
Oh, in theater? Well, yes and no. I mean, I was never felt left out, of course, but during the time when I was doing theater, I was also very busy with um, with TV work. So I would actually be doing drama, and then I would go into rehearsal. So it was just really a busy time for me.
Mhm.
And of course, some days my I didn't really know how to sing on stage. So basically on stage, you have to do two shows every day for 30 days. I mean, it's not like Broadway where it's a long running show for years and years, but to do two stages. I remember on Wizard of Oz to do two stages every day for 30 days. I think I did like 52 stages that month. I remember I woke up and I lost my voice. I just couldn't sing. And I
Yeah.
just, but I still had to go on stage, and I couldn't say to my manager, oh, I can't go into drama today because I have my stage. I just had to do both. So I just
Wow.
remember I gave a very poor performance for a few days on stage and I was like miserable because these kids have, come to see Dorothy and I was like, my voice was just really bad.
Wow. I mean, that seems to be a common theme. I mean, throughout your career is just busy, busy, busy. And I think this is a good sort of segue into, you get married in 96 and blessed with two daughters. Do you feel like that point of time, having two kids as well as the marriage, did that change the way you approach work? I mean, it's almost a rhetorical question because it seems like it would be almost impossible to sort of keep running off these 4 or 5 hour, sleep days.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, definitely having children changed my lifestyle. I realized that work couldn't be my priority anymore. I would have to put my children's schedules first. So, of course, I had to speak with my agency, my manager, and we shifted everything. And I also realized that having children really widens so much of your perspective. You learn to be patient and you learn to be loving. And, through them, I met so many great friends. And of course, jumping forward, because my husband and I made the conscious decision to send them to an international school. It was really interesting. I just remember walking back into ASIJ thinking, wow, this is the school life that I missed. And here I am. I get it back through through my children. And it was really wonderful, just to see how education worked in the Western sense or the ASIJ sense, and how devoted the teachers and the, education specialists were. So it really opened me to a whole different world, besides just, show business and my work.
And when you returned to ASIJ, I said it's sort of a two-parter question is, was it always sort of your intention from the time your daughters are very young to put them into ASIJ? And when you did, go back to ASIJ as a parent, how are things different, if they were different at all, from when you left in 1982?
Don't really remember me thinking, well, when I have kids, I'm going to put them at, through international school. It's just that when we actually had our firstborn, my husband and I sat down and we both realized that we both went through the Western or the American education system. And when I had to transfer from ASIJ to a Japanese high school, I just remember I really struggled. Academically, yes, of course, but more so culturally, I couldn't understand so many of the school rules that they had. For instance, and maybe it was just especially a really strict school, but for instance, if my hair was longer than my shoulders, I would have to tie it, and or if my lips were dry, I couldn't wear lip balm because they would make they would shine, and apparently it looked like a delinquent. I don't know why. So I had dry lips through my high school years. It was kind of crazy. And so like little things like that, I just really couldn't accept. And
Mm.
we just realized we were so much more comfortable with the education that we had growing up. So we decided that's what we would put our children through. Now,
Mm.
when I went back to SIJ, did I notice the difference? I just have to say, wow. thank you to our parents for putting us through the, international school system. Of course, I was in Hawaii, so it was different, but I think even going to ASIJ for that 1 year really made me realize, like I had mentioned, how wonderfully meshed the cultures were, and
Mm.
each culture, the different cultures were. And had I noticed it back then, I don't know. I just remember it was really comfortable. But going back as a parent of a child or a student at ASIJ, I realized how much effort and how much time and how much thought goes into educating, the kids and the students. So of course, I had a really deep appreciation of that. And I was also involved with PTA, a lot of volunteering. So I was able to see, both sides, from the parent side as well as the school side. And it was a really good experience, I have to say.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I wonder how many people, and you probably know this better than I do. I think there's more and more people who are, I guess, in comparison to the 80s and 90s when we had, a lot of expats from like places like IBM, those people came and they went, right? But now there's a lot more people who went as students who also send their kids there. Would you say, with the parents you see around you at ASIJ, are there more than just you, for example, in your daughter's grade level with parents who actually went to international schools themselves?
Yeah, I actually have a few alums that I met when I was there at ASIJ, and we had kids around the same time, so they're there with their kids. So that's kind of odd, but it's kind of exciting too, right? Like, yeah, this is where, we used to play hooky, right? Like when we were in like in the school courtyard, which our kids could never do now. I think they're so much more heavily monitored. I don't know how some on some days we were able to actually cut class, but back then. But yeah, there are a few, yes, and of course there are. When I was in PTA, I remember when my kids were in middle school, because it was after the Lehman shock, there were a lot of Japanese parents. So parents who went through the Japanese school system and didn't want their children to go through the same system. So they opted, for an international school, and they chose ASIJ. But they wouldn't understand the system as much. They didn't understand how the parents were so involved, or how they could be involved, or they couldn't understand how easily it was to approach a teacher to ask them a question about their children, because I guess depending on the Japanese school you're in, you really couldn't do that. You couldn't go up to a teacher and say, "Hey, Mr. Harris, can I talk to you about my child?" And I said, at ASIJ, you really can. I mean, you can't just walk in a classroom, but you can definitely email them. And
Mm.
it's a very open communication system, don't you think?
Yeah,
And
I would agree. I definitely, see that even where I work at, it's an international school, but primarily Korean parents. And there is definitely that culture of just sort of, there's less direct of a line. Whereas you said, obviously no one can just step into a classroom. That'd be problematic, but it is very easy to just email someone and be like, hey, there's definitely that direct line of contact, which seems to be
right.
lacking in,
Mm.
public school systems in Japan and Korea. The final point here is I like to ask the guests what is coming up in the coming months, years. I know it's Corona time, and everyone, a lot of people have told me they're not sure. But yeah, what is coming up in the next few years?
What is it? As a parent, well, my daughter is graduating this year, so we will be empty nesters. I don't know if I can handle it, but I will. I will have to find a way. I just have to say, having a college student, I know this doesn't really answer your question directly, but having a college student, she's in her second year, having seen her grow, having left home, she's semi-independent, and then having her come back home. It's just really interesting. I mean, to see how your children grow as an individual and as a person. And when you talk about life or anything about values, you realize, wow, when did all this get embedded in them? I don't know, but you just hope
Mm.
you've done a good job and that they'll be okay in the world. So I will definitely be sad to see my younger one go off to college, to see her go off to college. But I'm also really, of course, excited for her as well. And when they're gone, I guess I'll have more time to work, which I love. Like, I am so thankful that my career has spanned as long as it has. I feel very fortunate to be surrounded by great staff, and I just really feel lucky. I'm actually coming into my 40th year next year.
Wow.
Um,
Congratulations. Wow.
thank you. See, this is what happens when you start at 8. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, I mean, I think in normal years, um, we would probably be thinking of doing a live concert, and maybe touring, but of course, it's not like that anymore. So I really don't have anything planned, although I do have some ideas. And yeah, I'm just really thankful that my fans have been with me throughout the years. So I want to do something that shows my appreciation of the last 40 years. Gosh, 40, that sounds like such a long time, but yes.
What a career. Yeah. And we were just talking off air. There's all these interactions you had with so many different people. And, I was mentioning that people said I kind of look like Wentz sometimes. Like, oh, yeah, I know him. And so it's like, that's really
Yes.
cool. And yeah, that takes us right to the end here. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I hope I was able to answer all your questions okay. And yes, I hope a lot of people watch the podcast.
Me too. Thank you.